Okay, let's just try this again. So let's say Atari, Nintendo. The first video game I really saw was the Atari console when I was in high school. And then a later video game is Nintendo, the Nintendo console, right? And I'm going to use this to make an example. The characters and everything was more real in the Nintendo. So the Atari was, you know, the one person might be like 8 pixels, like this little pixel man walked around some space, having battles with his like his 3 pixel long sword, And then by Nintendo, it looks a lot more real. The backgrounds are more realistic. Everything's more realistic. And then now we have World of Warcraft and all this stuff, and it's all even more realistic. So what we have here is a spectrum of realism. Okay, so this is something everybody gets. Now contrast that with what we have with the NDE. And these people come back from these NDEs saying it was more real. Now, what exactly does that mean? What is more? How could something's either real or it's not real? This saying something is more real doesn't really seem to make sense. But in fact, we do kind of understand this spectrum of reality. So, but in this, it sounds like we're really saying this is more realistic. So Nintendo is more realistic. It's not more real. They both exist. Atari and Nintendo both have the same level of existence. One isn't more real, one is more realistic, right? So this whole subject is kind of confusing, but as a scientific, rational observer, I can observe that this more real experience is had by 10% of cardiac arrest patients, predictably and observably. 10% of people whose heart has stopped in the hospital come back and say they saw something that was more real, that makes this world look like a shadow world. Let me see if I can make a little example of the shadow world, because I have this thing. I have to plug the lamp in. Look, it's my magic duck. But anyway, what I was going to point out was this, right? Shadow world. Let's see. There we are. So you see that hanging ball has a shadow, right? And we can say for sure, if we were just to see the shadow, everything in the shadow is in the ball, because we know, since the shadow is the shadow of that ball, that everything in that shadow is in that ball. Likewise, these NDEers are coming back and saying that we live in this shadow world, and there is a more real world that is actually the actual world, that our world is a reflection or a shadow of. This is predictable and observable and quantifiable. That's the big one, right? So if we can now quantify a greater reality. So this is a greater reality that is being experienced at an observable, quantifiable, and predictable rate.